water for Grandpa so he won't be thirsty. Now that is, of course, a fascinating understanding of the Christian burial rites in Catholicism, right? Okay, in other words, there is a, let's put it in our notes, there is a misunderstanding about cultures going both directions. Father Paul doesn't understand what the natives are doing with this old man. And of course, they have some misunderstandings as well about what's going on in Christian burial process, right? Then we have this interesting exchange at the church. Leon gets out. The symbols of the lamb on the old carved door. Notice the genius of Silko. She's able to construct character so brilliantly by doing something as simple as pointing out that when Leon is standing there, he starts playing with the ear flaps of his hat. What does this tell you? He's uncomfortable, right? He does not feel comfortable being here, and he knows he's asking something that he's probably going to get told no. What is it that he's going to ask? I only came to ask you, page 295, if you would bring your holy water to the graveyard. The priest, noticed, is going to turn away. He can't quite know how to answer. So he comes back with a question on 296. Why didn't you tell me he was dead? I could have brought the last rites anyway. Leon smiles. It wasn't necessary, Father. Let's point this out. That may be the most important line of the story. It wasn't necessary, Father. In other words, we understand what is necessary for the old man. But now, I want your help here. Will you at least help me out? Will you come down to the graveside and will you sprinkle some of your water so that we can have rain? There's an understanding of the same act. Let's put it in our notes this way. The same act, but it's interpreted in different ways. It's understood in different ways, right? Of course, we have the resurrection of the conflict on page 296. Father Paul will say, you know I can't do that, Leon. There should have been the last rites and a funeral mass at the very least. Again, Leon will say, it's getting late, Father. I've got to go. And you think that that's going to be the end of it. And then the word wait. And Father Paul decides, you know, it's against protocol, but I'm going to do it anyway. Now, his motives for doing this, let's write this down, brilliantly are never expressed in this story. Why does he do this? Does he do this because he loves the old man, even though he knows that he didn't save his soul according to Christian theology? Or is this, in fact, so that Father Paul then can have some kind of into the community and that maybe more of them will start to come to Mass? We don't know any of that. We don't know why Father Paul does what he does, but he decides to go down. The setting of New Mexico is mentioned on 296, and then again the observation that Trujillo is so small, he wonders, Father Paul, if it's not some perverse kind of Indian trick that's going on here. By the way, point of view here. We have the omniscient point of view. We know what any number of these different characters are thinking, right? And here we're focusing on Paul. Notice the nice touch. His fingers, I'm reading the last paragraph on 296. His fingers were stiff, and it took him a long time to twist the lid off the holy water. What a brilliant little... Why does it take him so long to get the lid off the holy water? Two answers. One, obviously it's cold and his fingers are stiff. Two, well, he's probably a little reluctant. Am I doing the right thing here? Is this something that, you know, I probably maybe could get in some trouble, either in this world or the life to come, he might be thinking, right? Is this the right thing to be doing? Am I doing the right thing? And then he starts sprinkling the water. The nice simile that it was like on page 297, like August rain that fell while the sun was still shining, almost evaporating before it touched the wilted squash flowers. It's little lines like this that make Silko considered one of America's greatest writers. That little touch, that the water dropping on the old man in the blanket is like water falling in August, when of course in New Mexico it rarely rains at all, but rarely rains in August, right? And then it's over. The priest walks slowly away. Leon turns. He looks up at the red light from the west. It's the evening. And he felt good because it was finished. Now, of course, for those of you that know anything about Christian theology, it is finished are the last words reportedly spoken by Christ on the cross. It is finished. And so here we go with Leon, and it is finished. What is finished? Well, you could say a life is finished. You could say a burial is finished. Right? You could say any number of things are finished and he's glad. And he was happy about the sprinkling of the holy water. Now the old man, notice it's not his name, it's the old man, shrunken, small, shrunk, right, of the old man, could send them big thunderclouds for sure. Jot down in 2b, what's up with the title then? The title of the man to send rain clouds. And of course, the idea of legacy is really important in the story, isn't it? What is given to the youth by the old, what is left to the youth by the old, and of course, what youth have to do when the old pass. In other words, follow the ceremonies, follow the cultural rites, follow the things that matter the most. All right, now that we've worked level 1, let's jump to level 2a. What are the major messages and themes here? Well, we have several, don't we? 1, respect for traditions, cultural traditions. The appreciation of those cultural traditions. Why? Because they make us who we are, right? And of course, one of the beautiful things about America as a country is that it is a country that is made up of so many different cultures. And of course, those different cultures have to somehow learn to cohabitate. And the only way that we learn to cohabitate is to learn to try to understand each other. Notice Father Paul here doesn't agree with what's going on, but he decides to go ahead and to play along, right? To play his part. Number 2, another major theme here is obviously this youth-old age theme. It's a very important one, isn't it? The young have to take care of the old, as the old then will die. Finally, number 3 is a theme message. There is this symbiotic understanding between the two, right? Cultural understandings, youth-age understandings lead to hope. The hope, of course, is there in the title. The man to send rain clouds. By the way, it's not the old man to send rain clouds, which allows you to be able to ask, who is the man that's being represented here? Technically, of course, the one who is the man is the old man who has died Trujillo. But you can also think about the man to send rain clouds could be Leon, who went to talk to Father Paul and asked. That took an act of courage. And of course, Father Paul himself, who decides, okay, fine, I will do this. And of course, the hope is because of the sprinkling of the water, we're going to have rain. Okay, at level 3, or at level 2b, let's ask about the genius of the story. Obviously, setting is important. Jot down, why is setting so important? For example, you can't imagine this story being set, for example, in downtown New York City. It just doesn't work. This is a story which kind of requires that there be a certain kind of setting. Obviously, physical geographic setting, but also the setting of culture as well. What about conflict? What is for you the central conflict of this story? If I were to ask you, I'll work through them. You jot down the one that works for you. Is it an internal conflict? Is it an external conflict? Character versus another character. Certainly the exchange between Father Paul and Leon is an example of character versus character. Notice it's a different kind of conflict though. It's not the conflict of hunting somebody down, for example, as in Most Dangerous Game, but it's that subtle intellectual conflict where Father Paul says, you know I can't do that. And then he says, wait, okay, I'll do it. And you obviously know that Father Paul is engaging in some kind of internal conflict himself. Is this the right thing to do? I hope this is the right thing to do. It takes him a while even to get the lid off of the flask, right? To be able to sprinkle the holy water. Finally, let's work at level 3. What for you at 3a? What for you are the texts that come to mind in regards to cultural differences, in regards to burials, and the ways in which people are buried, and what's significant about that, and the treatment of bodies, and the ways that you're supposed to treat bodies? For example, at the conclusion of the Iliad, we mentioned it in a prior lecture, at the conclusion of Homer's Iliad, everything is about Priam, the king of Troy, coming to Achilles to beg for the body of his son Hector. Will you please give me the body back? Why does he need the body back? So he can give proper burial. Proper burial is tied then to an understanding of what happens after you die, right? You can't go in the Greek culture to Hades correctly until proper burial. Notice we have as well those issues of proper burial. Just to think a little bit in classical literature about that, I've mentioned the Iliad. I can also mention Dante's Inferno. That's a classic story about the notion of Dante the Pilgrim going through hell and all of that. Finally, at 3b, this is interesting questions. Let's ask these for you in terms of how you can relate to a text like this. What is your cultural heritage and understanding about issues of life and death? In some cultures, for example, it's really important that you celebrate birthdays. Why is that such a big deal? Because the celebration of birthdays is a reminder of how important it was that you were born. For your own cultural background, what do you understand about funerals? When was the last time you went to a funeral? What happened at that funeral? How is it similar to what you read about here? How is it different? The tying of a feather into the hair of the old man? What is up with that? Of course, sometimes when we don't understand cultural differences, we might ridicule or laugh or demean or make fun. This story suggests respect is always the better path. Respecting the cultures you don't understand. To say, well, they do it differently from the way maybe I was raised and I do it, but clearly demands a level of respect. Notice in the story the gentleness with which that body is treated of the old man, right? Of course, finally, the question is a personal question. What for you is probably the way you predict that you will go through a process of funeral and burial, right? The people you care about, the people you love, and then, of course, for you as well, how do you expect your body will be treated in your own burial? Some of you will say, well, that's a very morbid thought. No, I think that in the humanities, we have pointed this out already, that the only difference between you and a fly is you know about fly swatters. And because you've not met any 200-year-old people, you know that sooner or later, a burial is coming. A funeral is coming. It's just a question of how you wish for it to be conducted. How do you imagine that that will happen for you? This story obviously kind of resurrects questions about cultural identity through burial. Well, we'll turn now in our next text, and we'll go ahead and just turn the page to see it. We're going to work with our second text, which is going to come from a completely different culture, and yet we're going to ask similar questions about what's going on with the way you say goodbye to the people that you love, the people you care about. Thank you.